Ethan Blackwood's private jet touched down just before dawn, the city still wrapped in fog. The deal in Zurich had closed faster than expected, and for the first time in months, Ethan felt light. He imagined Vanessa's surprised smile, his mother's quiet happiness when she saw him home early. He didn't announce his arrival. He wanted the moment to be simple, warm, family. The mansion gates opened smoothly as his car rolled in. Something felt off the moment he stepped inside. The house was usually calm at this hour, filled with soft classical music his mother loved. Tonight, there was no music. Instead, sharp voices cut through the silence. A woman's voice, Vanessa's, rose in irritation, followed by a weak, trembling plea. Ethan set his briefcase down slowly, his instincts tightening like a knot. He moved down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. As he neared the living room, the words became clearer, cruel, impatient, laced with disgust. "I told you not to touch my things," Vanessa snapped. "You're always making a mess." Ethan stopped at the doorway. His mother, Margaret, was on the floor near the sofa, her thin hands bracing against the marble as she struggled to stand. Her silver hair had come loose from its neat bun, and her glasses lay broken nearby. She looked small, smaller than he had ever seen her. Standing over her was Vanessa, perfectly dressed, eyes burning with anger. "Get up," Vanessa demanded. When Margaret moved too slowly, Vanessa's foot lashed out, striking her leg. The sound was dull, horrifying. Margaret cried out softly, more in shock than pain, and curled inward to protect herself. Ethan's chest tightened. The world seemed to narrow to that single moment. The woman who gave him life, who sacrificed everything for his future, lying helpless in his own home. His first instinct was rage, white-hot and uncontrollable. His hands clenched, his breath shallow. Every muscle screamed at him to rush forward. But he didn't. Years of discipline forced him to stay still. He knew this moment would define everything that came after. With shaking fingers, he pulled out his phone, the camera silently capturing the scene. Vanessa continued, unaware she was being watched, her words cutting deeper than any blow. "This is my house now," she sneered. "Learn your place." Ethan felt something inside him break, not loudly, but completely. In that instant, the surprise visit ended. The wedding ended. The future he had imagined vanished, replaced by one cold, undeniable truth. Anyone capable of this cruelty was a stranger to him. Ethan remained frozen in the shadow of the doorway long after Vanessa stormed away, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. The silence that followed was worse. It pressed against his ears, heavy and suffocating. His phone was still in his hand, the screen glowing faintly, the evidence safely recorded. He hated that he needed to do it, but he knew he'd never forgive himself if he hadn't. Margaret lay where she had fallen, breathing shallowly, one hand clutching her knee. Ethan rushed to her side, dropping to his knees, his expensive suit forgotten against the cold marble. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking in a way it hadn't since childhood. He carefully slid an arm beneath her shoulders, terrified that even the slightest movement might hurt her more. "I'm all right," she said softly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She just lost her temper. I shouldn't have touched her things. Her instinct, even now, was to protect others, to minimize her own pain. That realization cut Ethan deeper than the scene he had just witnessed. He helped her onto the sofa, retrieving a blanket and wrapping it around her thin frame. Her hands were shaking. Up close, he noticed details he'd missed before, a faint bruise forming on her leg, the redness in her eyes from unshed tears, the way her shoulders curved inward as if she were trying to make herself smaller. "I sold my house so you could chase your dreams," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "I never wanted to be a burden." Ethan swallowed hard. Memories flooded back. His mother counting coins at the kitchen table, skipping meals so he could eat, telling him to study harder so his life would be easier than hers. He had promised himself that one day she would never feel unsafe again. And yet, under his own roof, she had been hurt. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice low and steady despite the storm inside him. "I should have been here." Margaret reached up and touched his cheek. "You did nothing wrong, Ethan. You're a good son." That was the moment his shock transformed into resolve. Not loud anger, not reckless violence, something colder and more precise. He stood, straightened his jacket, and looked around the room. The broken glasses, the scattered papers, the place where his mother had fallen. Ethan understood then that being powerful wasn't about how loudly you could rage. It was about what you chose to protect, and what you were willing to cut away without hesitation. By evening, the mansion felt like a courtroom rather than a home. The lights were brighter than usual, every corner exposed, every shadow erased. Ethan had planned everything with the same precision he used in business. His lawyer sat quietly at the dining table, a slim briefcase beside him. Two members of household staff stood near the wall, uneasy but attentive. Vanessa arrived last, confident, dressed elegantly, already wearing the smile she used when she wanted control. Ethan remained standing. "Why is everyone here?" Vanessa asked lightly, glancing around. "Is this some kind of surprise?" Ethan didn't answer. He tapped his phone once and connected it to the large screen on the wall. The video began to play. Vanessa's voice filled the room first, sharp, impatient. Then her image appeared, standing over Margaret. The kick, the words, the cruelty, raw and undeniable. The room seemed to lose its air. One of the staff covered her mouth. Vanessa's parents stared at the screen in disbelief, their faces draining of color. "Turn it off," Vanessa hissed, stepping forward. "This isn't what it looks like." Ethan raised a hand, stopping her without touching her. The video continued until the end. Only then did he switch it off. Silence fell like a verdict. Vanessa laughed nervously, brushing her hair back. "She provoked me. You know how she is. Always acting helpless." Her eyes searched Ethan's face, expecting anger, negotiation, anything familiar. What she found instead was calm. "The engagement is over," Ethan said evenly. "There will be no wedding." Her smile shattered. "You can't be serious. After everything we planned. My mother sold her home so I could build my first company," he continued, his voice steady but cold. "She raised me alone. Anyone who hurts her has no place in my life." Vanessa's parents tried to speak, but Ethan turned to his lawyer, who slid a folder across the table. "Everything in this house belongs to Ethan Blackwood," the lawyer stated. "Miss Carter has no legal claim to any property or assets." Vanessa's confidence collapsed into panic. "Ethan, please," she cried, reaching for him. "I was angry. It won't happen again." Ethan stepped back. "You have 1 hour to pack your belongings. Security will escort you out." The words landed heavier than any shout. As Vanessa was led away, her sobs echoed down the hallway. Ethan didn't flinch. Justice, he knew, didn't need rage, only truth and the courage to act on it. The mansion felt different once Vanessa was gone. Not quieter, cleaner, as if the walls themselves had exhaled after holding their breath for too long. Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows, touching the floors gently, without tension or fear. Ethan stood in the doorway of the living room, watching his mother sit by the window, a warm blanket over her legs, a cup of tea resting in her hands. He had barely slept, not from regret, but from clarity. Later that day, Ethan met with his lawyer again. A formal police report was filed, accompanied by the video evidence. A restraining order followed swiftly. There was no satisfaction in it, only finality. Ethan understood now that protecting someone you love sometimes meant taking steps that looked harsh to outsiders but were necessary for safety. Over the next weeks, the house transformed. Ethan ordered the marble floors replaced with warm wood that wouldn't be slippery under his mother's feet. The sharp-edged furniture disappeared, replaced by soft corners and familiar comforts. The living room became Margaret's favorite place again, filled with sunlight, flowers, and the gentle music she loved. Ethan changed too. He canceled overseas trips, delegated more work, and started coming home before sunset. In the evenings, he cooked simple meals with his mother, listening as she told stories from his childhood, stories he'd been too busy to hear before. Sometimes she laughed, sometimes her voice trembled, but each day she seemed stronger. One afternoon, Margaret looked at him and said quietly, "You didn't just defend me. You chose me." Ethan met her eyes. "I always will." News of the broken engagement spread quickly. Some people whispered that Ethan had been ruthless, that he overreacted. When asked directly in an interview months later, he gave a single sentence that ended the discussion. "Wealth means nothing if it can't protect the people who sacrificed everything for you." He donated generously to organizations supporting the elderly and victims of domestic abuse, not for publicity, but because he understood the silence that surrounds suffering. His actions shocked many, but for Ethan, this was not revenge. It was balance restored. In the quiet of the evening, as Margaret rested peacefully nearby, Ethan realized the true measure of success had never been his fortune. It was the courage to draw a line, and the love to stand firmly on the right side of it.